Hi, good afternoon. Welcome to America Outdoors, our spring webinar series. Today, we are actually here with a webinar with Dave Dennis from Cornerstone Safety Group. The webinar is called Using Crisis Response Plan as a Guide to Managing Daily Events. Cornerstone and America Outdoors have actually partnered up just recently. So we are working on creating and providing better risk management and safety resources for our members. So we started last fall with a webinar called Creating Your Crisis Response Plan. And that video is still available. We are building on that from last time too. So we're using that initial plan to build on today's message or today's lesson. So if you want to go back, I think Hillary's just dropped it in the chat. Thanks, Hillary. That's there from before. And then be waiting for Cornerstone and America Outdoors to release some new resources for you, tangible resources that you can pull from our website. Those will all be introduced shortly, in addition to the continued resources and learning that they're providing through webinars and conference. So Dave will be up shortly. Before we get started, a couple America Outdoors messages for you from me. We have a lot of events going on right now. We have 2 more webinars in this series next week and the following. We have 2 fall fundraiser trips coming up that are awesome opportunities to network and be together in the outdoors with your peers, enjoying the time and kind of working on your businesses together. We have Managers Academy, which is a huge learning experience for any managers, new managers that you have. That is also available. Early bird pricing ends this Friday. So if you are interested and you want to get in there, I would suggest signing up this week. I believe Hillary just dropped that in the events page in the chat as well. So if you want to jump on there and check any of those out, they're all listed on that same page. And then I have with us here Earl B. Hunter Jr. Welcome, Earl.
Hey.
He is with Black Folks Camp 2, and we are introducing a partnership that will start in 2 weeks. And I am going to let you, Earl, have a few minutes to kind of tell everybody about it and get excited. And I will see you all in a second to get us started with Dave. Go ahead,
Right
Earl.
on, Karen. Hey, listen, folks. My name is Earl B. Hunter Jr. I'm the founder and president of Black Folks Camp 2. And I've had an opportunity to speak with you all a few years ago about our company and what we were doing. We received rave reviews from you all and a lot of feedback. I just want to reiterate with you and tell you who we are. You know, our company was created and built by a seasoned executive in the outdoor industry, which is myself. I was a longtime executive in the RV industry, one of the only Black executives in that space. And I started Black Folks Camp 2 so we can actually encourage, educate the industry on why the consumer, why the Black consumer, or why the minority consumer is not in the outdoors. And we are embarking on something special. We have already created an amazing training course to help you all understand the why so we can get to the what, when, where, and how. So you can invite and welcome more consumers to take place, to actually to start to enjoy the outdoors, to from guiding, from the outfitting space. We want to make sure as a company that we actually help you invite and welcome those consumers to come and spend their hard-earned money to take part into your spaces and where you are. You know, Black Folks Camp 2 was built on the foundation of this particular campfire, which is in our logo, which is called the Unity Blaze. Let me make sure I say that again. This is called the Unity Blaze. And the Unity Blaze means that you're invited and you're welcome. And what's so amazing about that is what you're about to see in the next 6 to 7 months, what we're doing as a company, Black Folks Camp 2. You're going to see that Unity Blaze at almost every state park in America because Black Folks Camp 2, we created these incredible courses and training courses for state parks in America, and not only just state parks, but all over the country in regards to the outdoor industry. They're all going through our Unity Blaze training course. What I'm really excited about, we've already launched our training courses at several state parks in America. We started off in Indiana. We've moved to Wisconsin. Now we're actually headed to, we're in Oregon. And next we'll have 3 to 4 other states that are coming on board. And I'm excited to produce and to present this training course that we're actually going to share with you all, to all the members at AOA. The training cost for this, the training cost is we subsidize, we drove down the cost for members at AOA. And again, not only are you going to get an amazing training, but you're also going to get an opportunity to for us to start to pull the consumer into, hopefully take part into all the activities that you actually have. And again, when you think about Black Folks Camp 2, we always want folks to think about ROI. And ROI to most folks mean return on investment. It means that for us as well, but we coined the words return on inclusion. In the next 2 weeks, you're going to be receiving some information about the course, why the course is so important. And I got to tell you, we've had already rave reviews on the course because our job is not to call folks out. Our job is to call folks in. We don't twist arms, we twist hearts, and we just believe that the industry, the outdoor industry, is going to benefit from inviting and welcoming a new consumer. As a matter of fact, we believe the outdoor industry will fail if the outdoor industry does not learn how to invite a new consumer based on demographics. And so our job is to help you do that. Our job is to help you do that delightfully. Our job is to make sure that you are educated, but more than anything, our job is to help you invite and welcome a new consumer. And there's more information that's coming. Don't worry, this is not it. There's more information that's coming, but we want you all, everyone on the sign of our boards, to earn your Unity Blaze pen. We want you to earn it, so when folks see it, they know that they are invited and welcome into the outdoor spaces. I know you all are going to do a good job. I know everybody's going to get excited about it based on the feedback that I've had before. And I know that everyone on the sound of my voice, when you talk about inclusion in the space, we're going to do this in a way that our children are going to be proud of the legacy that we leave. And I'm talking about your children, and my children, that we are going to leave an amazing legacy, that we're all going to get around the campfire, literally and figuratively, and have some conversations. And we're going to find out we got more same than differences. We believe in unity in the outdoor community and beyond. Look forward to getting your feedback from the information you're going to receive from Hillary and the gang here at AOA. And I look forward to you all driving it to make the outdoors more inclusive. So thank you so much. And if there's any questions or comments, feel free to reach out to Hillary or Karen, and they'll get those to us. But this partnership is going to be magnificent, magnificent, magnificent. And
Yes.
last thing, make sure you
And
go and follow us on social media, Black Folks Camp 2. Follow us on social media. You'll see that we probably are one of the most delightful companies in the world. All right. So thank you.
Earl, thank you. We will have more information coming on that. And also, if you want to, you feel free to drop questions just in the question box on your screen now too, and we'll get back to you on those. Earl, thanks so much.
All right.
We're
Thank you
gonna
so
get
much.
the
I'm sorry.
yeah, we're gonna be nope, all good. Thank you, Earl.
Hey, listen, I hope you all have the most amazing day of your life today, and I hope tomorrow is better.
Thank
All right.
you.
Cheers.
Um, we are going to get the presentation kicked off here. This is Dave Dennis with Cornerstone Safety Group. Um, Dave will definitely have time for questions at the end, but please feel free. I will monitor the question box and interrupt if we need to throughout. Feel free to drop those questions in now. Otherwise, he will ask for them in the end. And Dave, without further ado, I'm going to turn it over to you and disappear, but I'll be here if you need me.
Awesome, Karen. Boy, the stage is set. How do I follow up that passion of Earl and Unity Blaze and calling in, not calling out? That's pretty amazing. Shout out to Earl. That was great. Hi, everyone. Again, Dave Dennis here. I am the executive director and co-founder of Cornerstone Safety Group. And I spoke to you back in October, I believe, when we had a session talking about crisis response planning and how to design a crisis response plan and a team, and how do we implement and train on this crisis response within smaller organizations, which I know so many of us are, and what those limitations look like. I asked Karen and Hillary and Aaron and the team to allow me to come back and speak to kind of what I see as a phase two around this crisis response planning. And really what we're speaking to is how do we use the crisis response structure for more common day-to-day events. And I think this is real because, implementation around crisis response is really important, but it's very rare that situations are falling into that heavy bucket of significance and severity and so forth. But I really believe in the structure that we talked about last time, and I'll recap that just here shortly. When I review what we're talking about, if you weren't able to join last time or you weren't able to look at the recording, just want to give an overview of what we talked about briefly last time, but then really dive into today's content. And again, how do we use that crisis response structure to manage day-to-day events? And then I'll talk about how can you as organizations and leaders in your orgs to design workshops to really narrow this down and implement it within your organizations. Okay. So as you will remember, a little bit of recap here. When we talked about crisis or emergency planning, and those terms are used interchangeably, but really I look at the severity in three buckets. Number one is on the left side. When we have incidents, those are our day-to-day events where we pull out the first aid kit, we address an injury or an illness or something along those lines as well. And those are the day-to-day events on the incidents. But when we look towards the emergency bucket, we're really talking about those significant events that have that threat to life and limb, but it's manageable within organizations because we've been intentful and we've taken the time to build a crisis response structure or an emergency response structure. When we think about a crisis, by definition, as I think about it, a crisis can be a turning event for the organization. So if we're dealing with a life or limb situation, but we haven't put in the planning, we haven't trained our teams, had those conversations, nobody really knows what to do. So we're on our heels and we're responding in a less organized manner. Again, this can overwhelm an organization and create that tipping point where it could be catastrophic to the organization. So by developing our plans, we're moving situations out of the crisis and keeping them in this manageable state. Also, as you will remember, I'm a huge fan of the incident command system, and this is the system used by search and rescue and first responders, both within North America, but also globally as well. And I like it because it segments what are the functions of the crisis response, who's doing what, where do they focus their attention to, and how do all of those actions between what happens in the field, how are we communicating and responding to the event from the communication standpoint, how are we thinking about and supporting logistics and finance? And then how do we engage our advisors, like our attorneys, insurance brokers, and so forth? All of this is overseen by the incident command. As you will recall, I've worked a long time starting in 2010, and actually part of my master's degree was around developing the incident command structure to the travel and adventure and recreational industries. And really that just speaks to what are we looking at with our guides in the field, maybe utilize local partners and so forth. How do we support them from the office standpoint, engage with first responders, and then traveling responders, us sending those people, maybe even ourselves as business owners on site to help manage the situation. Focusing here on the first responder component, what I like about utilizing the incident command structure is when we call on and rely on park rangers or law enforcement or fire department or whatever, they're already speaking in terms of the ICS. So when we talk about our incident command, when we talk about our operations or communications function, they have aligned systems. So it just improves that alignment and what we're doing. Okay. The other piece, just to touch base on, is thinking about how do we assign roles. And you will recall that we're thinking about assigning roles in a couple different contexts. Number one, what is the day-to-day function of an individual within my organization? What are they doing normally? If we're thinking about our communications function, who's monitoring our social media site? Who's writing web content? Who's sending out and creating brochures, catalogs, and so forth? Those people are naturally speaking the language of the organization, so they would be a great lead in the communication function, operations. Maybe you have a director of programming and so forth on your team. You can see how those naturally align within the primary role. But I don't want to stop with the primary role because life happens. We could have the CEO out on site for some reason. We could have maybe personal bereavement or a personal challenge that's happening in our lives. And if I'm in a certain response role, and I don't have the mental capacity because I'm going through a life challenge personally, I want to be able to raise my hand and say, hey, put me in a different function because I can't talk to a family member of somebody who's deceased or in the hospital in critical care and so forth. So building out the bench in primary, secondary, and even tertiary roles where it makes sense is a really important component around designing our response team. Then we talked about our response plan. And when I think about the sections of the binder that you may have on property within your office staff, but I also believe in having these electronically available, what are those sections we need to think about? I always place on the first, laminated sleeve of the binder, the initial actions. When we receive that call from the field, what are we paying attention to? It's the who, what, when, where, how. Anybody else involved? What do you need right now? And how are we documenting those notes? Then we talk about activating the response team. Then thinking about individual responder roles and checklists, communication plan, whatever, you can read the screen as well. But this is what a comprehensive crisis response plan looks like, because it's number one, it's comprehensive in terms of content. Number two, it's a great binder. It's a great resource to share with your insurance brokers as you're renewing insurance, gathering new insurance, maybe you're an earlier stage organization in insurance. It also creates a really great defense mechanism, business protection wise, if there is legal claims down the road and so forth, right? But it doesn't stop there, because having a binder, having a response team, and everything else is very important. But it's that implementation. How do we use it? How do we pull this binder off the shelf and put it into action? Okay. Rough overview and a shortened overview of what we talked about last time. And again, if you're unclear on any of those, please reach out to myself or review that prior session. Diving into today. So pulling back from that crisis response, we at Cornerstone use the incident severity model of the stoplight. It's easy to understand, green, yellow, red. You may have a level 1, 2, or 3 within your organization or whatnot. But for today's context, I just really want to narrow in on what does it look like from incident severity. I categorize green as a minor event that happens, but it doesn't require external support. We're not going to a medical facility. We're not calling park rangers or search and rescue or any of that. It may have a group disruption, right? We may need to stop what we're doing, pull out the first aid kit, address it. Maybe we need to delay this morning's, departure if somebody's ill or we're dealing with something. But green events are very manageable within our field staff and those delivering the program. The yellow events are more significant. It usually involves a non-life-threatening event, but it does require some level of external support. We need to take somebody to a medical facility. We need to call in search and rescue or support to help evac somebody as well. But we're not dealing with a helicopter evac. We're not dealing with something that is life-threatening. That is certainly the red bucket and where the crisis/emergency response team comes into play. But this yellow event are often very tricky. We spend a lot of time building, developing plans around the red category or the level 3. But the yellow events can be very challenging and even trying on our field staff as well. And that's what I wanted to focus on today. How do we bring a structure to managing these mid-level events? So let's talk about that. Here you'll see, you just, again, reframing what does the crisis response team look like. But when we're thinking about that mid-level, that yellow level response, we don't necessarily need to involve our advisors. We might not need to send a traveling responder. And what does that communications look like? But the functions are still there, right? We have you perhaps at HQ in the office. Maybe you're a program manager, a course director, or whatever the label you use. But it's somebody where we are referring, when we have a call from the field that goes into the office, that office personnel is acting as the incident commander with these mid-level events. We rely on our operations team to manage what's happening in the field. We then need to think about the communications. Who needs to know what? It's not broadly speaking, because we're not dealing with a crisis, but there is a component of communication that needs to take place. We might have some logistics and we might have some finance aspect as well. So let me add a little bit of context and color to what I'm talking about in broad terms. So let's say my example here is you receive a call into the office from your field guide reporting a participant injury. The participant had slipped while hiking and had fallen about 6 feet down an embankment, resulting in a suspected broken ankle. The ankle has been stabilized by your guide, but the participant is still unable to place any weight on the ankle and therefore they can walk out. So you, as the manager, as the person in HQ, instruct the guide to call local emergency support to help in a non-life threatening evacuation. This is a yellow category because we're calling in from external support. The group has a disruption. We now are separating the rest of the hiking group from the one that needs to go back. You can see where we're going for. And certainly, if we're dealing with an ankle injury that's been stabilized, but they can't place any weight, we want to get them medically checked. Okay. My example here, clearly falling right into this yellow category. So what are we going to do? Whoops. What are we going to do with this, right? Thinking about this yellow level response. So I'm the manager in the office and I get this call from the guide. I'm instructing the guide, in this case, you stabilize the injury. That's wonderful. I'm, as a manager in the office, going to take some notes. We probably have some notes coming from the field eventually and so forth. But I instructed my guide to also call emergency services. We needed help with a minor level evacuation. That's what's happening in the field. Well, how do we think about communication? Well, maybe we're dealing with a minor. Maybe we're dealing with somebody or a situation where we need to reach out to their loved one, those emergency contacts that they've listed on maybe your enrollment form or your waiver when they were getting ready to go out on your day excursion or whatever that might look like. So we have a level of obligation potentially to contact the emergency person on their behalf or help facilitate that client emergency contact communication. We also have to deal with the communication, a level of communication with the remaining group. When we separate the group, we all can relate. They're still going to be concerned. They might not be travel partners or so forth, but they're still part of this inner circle of what's happening. And there is a level of impact on their experience given this example. Maybe you have multiple guides on the trip, but we're removing one to go back with this injured participant. And now you're down one staff member organizing the rest of the group. We need to communicate what's going on within that function. So here within the comms function, you can understand we need to consider what happens with that emergency contact. We need to consider what messaging we're getting over to the rest of the people in that group. Thinking about logistics. Do we have transportation available or do we need to call something on site? Do we know where the local hospital or the clinic is? Fine. Do we need to send somebody there that can run support and so forth as well? These are logistical challenges or arrangements that we make in the office when we're dealing with this yellow level event. And finally, we think about the medical insurance, the financial component of our crisis response team. We're not dealing with the crisis. We're not involving a ton of extra people. Maybe in this yellow level event, the manager can manage this client emergency contact or help facilitate that. The guide will probably be managing the communications, but we in the office need to make sure that these functions are happening. It's duty of care. We're thinking about the rounding of our incident response and what does that functionality look like. I want to pause here. And Karen, have you had any questions come in? Because I just, again, simple overview of what we're talking about here. But I just wanted to see if anybody has questions or thoughts that you're welcome to chat as well.
Yeah, Dave, I don't have anything in the question box yet. If anyone
Great.
does, feel free to type those in, or also you can raise your hand and we can unmute you if you want to ask them. But I've got nothing right now, Dave.
Okay.
Thanks.
Awesome. Fantastic. Of course. So let's talk about what does this actually mean for organizations? You understand what I'm trying to drive at and how do we use this crisis team development and so forth. But I like to implement this within workshops. And there's a few ways that I think about doing this. And what I found the most traction and the most understanding is creating this in a way that we can develop it around staff training. Again, we're thinking about office staff in particular. So this is not necessarily something that I would engage with field staff. They certainly have a role in this, but I'm thinking about that middle tier, middle management, leveling up our skills from the office standpoint. So first there needs to be this general understanding of what severity levels are, whether you use the stoplight model, the level 1, 2, or 3. We need to understand within our organization, we have a level of severity rating system that we've adopted within our organization. I think it's important on the severity levels because if we get a phone call in from field staff and they say, Dave, I have a yellow level event, I have a green level event, and I'm reporting it to you, I immediately know what level of anxiety, number one, that I need to be thinking about. If the phone call gets cut off for whatever reason, if we're saying those words, if our field staff are trained to report outwardly with these severity levels, I know if we get our phone cut off or our communications cut off after I hear a yellow level event, I immediately know, okay, this is more significant and so forth. So I love the implementation around severity levels and training that with our field staff when they report an issue. So there needs this general understanding. Second, we need familiarity with the crisis response plan. I see this level of workshop and training as a great way to level up our staff in the office that aren't yet at the role of being a crisis responder if you have that luxury. Some organizations, especially smaller ones, everybody has an active role, and that speaks to a different level of training. But this is a soft way to think about how do we build this framework and this structure in with our team. So we need everybody that's participating in any type of incident response to know that we have a plan in place and what we do with it. And the last piece here, I love to use databases or case studies of events that have happened within my organization because they're real, they're relevant, and if it happened once, it's likely we could see that repeat kind of situation again. It's okay if you don't have a database or if you haven't yet tracked those as closely, maybe to create a workshop around this. There's certainly industry related events and so forth. But again, whenever we can use case studies, the better. When I think about the structure, we can think about it in a couple ways. So let's just hypothetically say I am the leader of my organization and I have brought in new seasonal staff that are going to be working full time within my office. I want to pair them up for this type of workshop with a more seasoned leader or a staff member that have been on my team before. I'm not here to scrutinize people. I'm not here to make them overly anxious that they're making bad decisions and whatnot. This should be, in my mind, a confidence building exercise. Sometimes to build confidence, we want to team seasoned people with newer people and so forth. We do that on our programs anyway, so I know you get that idea. So there's the first structure. How are we going to design this? Number two, let's use a staged scenario. Stage scenarios are great. We talked about it in the last session around the crisis response as well. But when we start with the initial phone call and then we elevate and escalate as things are getting more severe or we're learning more information and so forth, I think that's very much aligned with how situations happen in the field. All of the facts that we gather in the first phone call are going to be changed on the second phone call as we're learning more about the situation and so forth. Okay. So we want to develop this in phases. And then finally, I think the most important piece, we want to give freedom and flexibility to our team or independent exercise, however we're designing this. But we need to let our staff know what our intent is and how they need to think about that or what the goals we're trying to accomplish as well. Okay, and that happens with discussions. So in my example here, I'm going to review these goals, but let's say again, organizational leader, I want to hear how my team notifies us of an injury. I want to hear what their field response looks like. I want to make sure that they're escalating when it feels right as per our protocols and so forth. Want to hear what the leader and the group dynamic looks like. That's one maybe piece. Number two, I want to think about how do we complicate situations when we learn about a pre-existing condition or new information is revealed or any of those things. What happens? How does our team respond with that type of inject? And then on the third piece, for me, maybe I want to practice what does duty of care look like for my team? How do they think about we have somebody who's leaving our program or going home or needs an overnight in the hospital? What are they thinking about in managing kind of that crisis response structure? Okay. So again, another scenario as an example. So let's say we're providing this workshop And I'm going to challenge my team with phase number one. And I personally am a fan of using 2 to 3 people as thought partners because that's how I would model my program. So we have a group of 3 leaders and I share with them phase one. You receive a call from your guide saying their participant slipped while they were in the shower this morning and that participant hit their head. The participant's sister, who's also traveling with the group, arrived at breakfast and relayed the story to the guide, the person who's relaying it to me. The guide immediately went to the participant's room, finding the injured person laying on the floor, and that participant reported feeling dizzy and nauseous. The guide performed an initial exam and no further injuries are suspected. So, my team of 3, what are you thinking about? Spend 5 minutes, talk about your initial steps of what you would do with this information. Again, we got the call from the field. What does that look like? What are we thinking about, in these stages? What are the response functions? What do you need currently? What more information are you looking for? And how are you directing all of these functions if they're appropriate? We probably don't need any logistics, probably don't need any finance here, probably not any communications, but in phase one, we're really focused on that initial response and what's happening from the operations function. Oops, sorry, I went the wrong way. Next phase. After talking with you, the guide returned to the participant's room. They've engaged in some conversation, and the guide finds out the participant had suffered a concussion 2 weeks prior to coming on the trip. This was not disclosed to you previously, whether it was undisclosed on health information, you don't go into those type of details, but now our staff have learned that there was a concussion that recently had happened. The participant states that they were cleared to perform mild activities on your trip, but by their doctor, but to avoid any contact sports or physical activity that would involve impacting the head. This is a challenge, right? It's new information coming into the scene. What is our office staff thinking about here? We need to think about pre-existing condition. We need to think about post-concussive symptoms. We have a mild activity by their doctor, but now that has been impacted because we have this head injury and now she's feeling dizzy and nauseous and so forth. What is our office staff telling the field team about what they're doing and what are those next steps? Same process, we're rinsing and repeating. Now it feels like, this incident command, certainly me as the office staff, we're doing operations. We may need to think about logistics. This is a little alarming to me because it is a head injury and a secondary concussive potential issue and so forth. Don't know if I need any communications at this point, but maybe, if we're going to that medical clinic and that feels appropriate, now we're separating that group. Now we're doing that same example of the ankle injury that I gave you before. We have separation of the group. How are we communicating that? And what does that look like? Okay. So the third phase is the rest of the group continues onward with the day's planned activities while the guide, the injured participant, and her sister go to the local hospital. After a normal head CT, the doctor says the participant has suffered a concussion and should limit any strenuous activity and recommends several days of rest prior to returning to the group, prior to continuing on with your trip. The participant's sister decides to remain in a nearby hotel and support her sister. They're asking for help finding a hotel. This is when we're enacting the full span, if you will, of this yellow level crisis response or incident response. So we have, again, let's look at these details. We have the group separating. So how are we discussing, sharing, talking with our guides, and directing the group for what are those rest of those activities look like? Bucket number one. Number two, the doctor has said that there's a concussion. We need to separate this participant, limit activities and get them into a room where they can rest, minimize stimulation and so forth while they're healing for a few days. And then the sister is asking for help. Where do I go from the hotel? So we have the group dynamic happening with operations. We now have two kind of buckets happening in the medical facility, happening with the rest of the group. We have communications. Can we help as an organization communicate this back to the family, the emergency contacts? How can we be supportive of what this looks like. And maybe we're not deciding to communicate with the emergency contact, but we can help provide talking points to those participants for when they're establishing the plan. What I mean by that is we have the organization is helping me organize where we're going to stay in the hotel. They're going to do a check-in every 24 hours. They're also going to help me get food supplies or whatever I need while I'm there, and I'm only a phone call away type of thing as well. Again, creating both the logistics and communicating those to those individuals that are separated from the group. And then what does that check-in look like for our guide and continuation and so forth? And the final piece here, um, do we need to involve travel insurance? Are they an international traveler coming to the US? Is this activating their domestic insurance and so forth? I'm not necessarily advocating that you need to get as an organization involved in that, but certainly we should be thinking about how to support those individuals. So when they get to the hospital, we should ask, at the appropriate time, do you have your domestic health insurance card with you? Do you have your travel insurance card with you? What can we do to help? They're asking for a credit card down on the hotel. They're asking for all of those things. Do you feel comfortable with what's happening and so forth as well? You can see where I'm going with all of these components and how we can look at the larger scope of the crisis response framework and how we can pull apart some of those to still think about a comprehensive response that is at a lower level that's needed. And again, I would then follow up this workshop and outline the goals I was looking to get accomplished. So phase one, I said I wanted to focus in on what you're instructing our field staff for their immediate response. We want to lean in towards human safety, isolating the situation, and seeing what we can get back on track with the rest of the group while providing that level of care. I also wanted to hear how we're talking about the escalation process, how our office staff is reassuring our guide in the field that, hey, I'm here, I'm available, and I'm monitoring this situation. We want to provide that reassurance with our field staff. And then how are we thinking about the group dynamic? What feels appropriate to continue on with? When do we need to pause and so forth? Second piece here, how does our staff respond to undisclosed information? It's such common practice. Is the immediate knee-jerk reaction is to cast blame on the participants and, oh, they should have told us, and, oh, whatever that might look like. Or do we respect it? We act on information as it's given to us. Are we remaining neutral with that so we're not creating bias? And are we also just acting on the information as it's learned? I go back to the initial statement I said. Facts are going to change from one call to the next, and we all know that. But are we actively addressing the information as it's presented to us within the office? And I think this is a really important piece because younger seasonal staff that are advancing into full-time positions sometimes have come from the field. They know that situations involved, and they may be working 2, 3 steps down the road, down the road. But we really want them to focus on what's happening in the current moment. And then the third piece here, what feels comfortable for us as an organization? When I think of our duty of care obligations, that legal, that moral and ethical obligation to provide human safety and well-being for our participants, that includes our logistical support, helping to create a plan. We don't have to drive everybody to every location if that's the structure of your program, but we have that control mechanism. We know where to go. We know how to get there. We can provide, as experts in the area of our travel, we can provide that logistical support. We can think about finance. When we have participants that are dealing with health injuries and they're reacting emotionally and so forth, they're not thinking about all the components. We can help soften the blow with those surprises by addressing financial and other aspects as well. And then how do we plan for temporary departures? What does it look like to allow somebody back on our program after a head injury or an ankle injury or any of those type of things as well? These are the challenges that, again, I think identifying our goals, we plan those as leadership ahead of time. We design that workshop in and around what those goals are looking to pull out, run it, and then we follow up with a discussion. Here's what I was looking to get out of it. Let's narrow down on X, Y, and Z as an outcome of the session. And then where can I, as a leader of my organization, provide more focus and more guidance. So Karen, that's what I had today. I would love to hear. I know there was a question or two that might have been pre-submitted with some of the questionnaires. I would love to open this up and hear what people are thinking.
Yeah, awesome. Thanks, Dave. I do have a question from Ken in the chat too.
Okay,
He's
great.
asking, can your crisis plan help you to mitigate legal exposure? You mentioned duty of care.
Yes, 100%. I think the short answer, and please, Ken, I would love to hear a follow-up question if I don't address it. Well, when I think about legal or duty of care, legal obligations, and business protection, my first point is always legal protection should not be the first priority of what we're doing. We're going to protect our organization by having a plan, by training the plan, and being able to articulate what that process look like and how we engage our team to prepare for worst case scenario. That is our obligation under duty of care. When we respond to situations, if we respond first with limiting information, not providing that human care, that human support, people are going to lean towards punitive damages. And I am going to sue Cornerstone Safety Group because I didn't feel like they cared about me. They were more worried about protecting their business. When we can flip that and say, wow, Cornerstone did everything and went above and beyond for my human care, I'm not going to sue them because I felt I cared for, or I may sue them because there's some technicalities in there and whatnot, or it may be an end result, but it's not leaning towards punitive damages. And I am now empowered emotionally, passionately, and so forth because I feel they did me wrong. The organization served me correctly, which creates a great business protection as well. And then we fall back on, through litigation, through explanation, how do we talk about the training, implementation, all these things? That collectively is what creates that business protection. Hopefully that wasn't an oversplain there.
I hope not. It sounded good. I think the details are important. Ken said always people
Thanks, Karen.
first. So that's
Yes,
great.
exactly.
Um, Anybody else have questions? Feel free to raise your hand if you have a question or a comment. Otherwise, I don't have anything else in the chat, but that's still available to Hillary.
Hey, yeah, I'm
Hi.
going to come on and ask a question.
Yeah.
When you're thinking about outfitters creating their own scenario workshops for their staff, um,
Mm.
how much emphasis do you put on the setting for these scenario trainings? Is it more important for it to be in the field, or is it more like a table read? And then I
Oh,
also have a
gotcha.
second question about like how much of their scenario planning should be red incidents versus yellow.
Got it. Thank you. So first around the setting, I think the setting is important, but I think it's also real in terms of where is our level of knowledge and skills with our staff. So if, again, we have new full-time seasonal staff that haven't really dealt with anything from the office standpoint, I think the comfortable, normal setting of the office building or a conference room or anything there with our normal day-to-day activity makes sense because that feels more natural. We have all the resources if they need to get on their computer and pull up handbooks or whatever, right? So I think that that's part of the training and the learning. If our team feels very skilled, then I love going out there and putting more real life context to what's going on. And that could be anything from running scenarios, even the yellow to the red. It could be going out and enjoying a hike with the group or doing kind of a cultural team building type of exercise, but maybe we implant, hey, if we were here with the group or we received a call in this location from the field via a sat phone or a spot device or any of those things, what are we thinking, where are the challenges, and so forth. So I think we can pull both the setting, both in a positive and a more challenging way, just depending on that level of skill set and knowledge and experience. The other question you had around more yellow, more red, all those things, Hillary, I think it's great. I naturally lean towards more yellow and like office conversations at the end of every season. What are we doing with all of our reports? Are we having ongoing development and conversations around what happened in the field? What does that look like? How do we learn going forward? That should be happening. Yellow events are often challenging, and I have been in many positions over the years where I thought man, I really responded to that poorly. I communicated to parents poorly or emergency contacts. I didn't give good advice. I was confusing to the field staff. I want to review those yellow events to hear input, how other people would have responded, reacted. Really great learning from all of that as well. I will say, as I leaned into last time that we talked, I love the idea of running two scenarios, red scenarios where we're activating our crisis team. I love running those twice a year. The idea being we know what a crisis looks like. They're scary as hell. We just want to jump out there and feel what that structure looks like, but it's not going to be that day-to-day activity. Utilizing the framework, what we're talking about today, is more common. It is going to happen every summer, maybe not to every organization, but we know it's going to happen. That I think just speaks to the commonality, the frequency, severity, and so forth. I'm curious if you have other thoughts, Hillary, or anybody else.
Dave, Karen, I'll let you take back over. Questions?
Thank you, Hillary.
Yeah, thanks, Hillary. Thanks for the questions. They're always good. Um, we did have one question that was typed in earlier, and that was about incident reporting. And it was like, when do we break out those
Yes.
incident reports? And I don't know if you want to touch on that. I know it's a little bit different than what
Sure.
specific, but if you want to touch on that, I think that's a question we get a lot. So
Yeah, exactly. And I think, thank you for that because it is a nuanced question, but so important. So take it with a grain of salt. And from my context, I'm a fan of incident reports whenever we pull out the medical kit is kind of the standard guide that we hear when we're in the field, right? And I think the intent behind that is if we administer something out of our first aid kit, and a wound gets infected or there's medications that have adverse effects or something, we want to have a log of what that looks like because it's our first aid kit, it's our personal property within the organization or organizational property as well. So I think that is a decent rule to go by, with the context of, hey, there could be something, this could be a 3-4 day event, it could go away and then come back or something, and noting it in some way is really important. I've also worked with organizations that don't create a full incident report with every opening of the med kit, but they add it to a daily log. I gave Johnny ibuprofen. I treated this wound, which was a minor scrape or something. I'm going to check on it twice a day, once a day, whatever that looks like. That could totally be fine within a daily log as well. Certainly when we're dealing with something that is more significant, certainly any yellow level event, anytime we need to report maybe back to the office, there's that enhanced ongoing need, something along those lines, that feels appropriate for me for an incident report. But I think they do have a critical piece of just documentation, number one, whether it's a SOAP note, a daily log, incident report, however you utilize that. But I think logging these things are important. So I think there's some of the nuance. And maybe it's a conversation with your attorney. Maybe it's a conversation with field staff. Maybe you have Woofer certified guides. Maybe you only have first aid CPR. I think there's a lot of nuances in around the design of trips, how remote we go, all of those that come into the factor. But some sort of noting and documenting whenever that first aid kit comes out, I think is an important piece. And then it's up to organizations how deep they want to go.
yeah, that's great. Thanks. I think that holds true a lot. It's always like err on the side of having it down, right? But how
Agreed.
much you want to do. Um, Ken added something else here too. He said FEMA's
Perfect.
ICS training is often referenced as well as the special event training. I'm not actually sure what that means. I'm not sure if you do, but he did put a link in the question box as well.
I would love to see, because I'm not familiar with, Incident Command System, FEMA, I get all of that, same structurally wise, but I'm not sure. Can you read that last part of the question again, how it relates to events?
Well, he said FEMA's ICS training is often referenced as well as the special event
Oh,
training.
yes, got it. I think it was just Ken confirming that FEMA uses the same model of the incident command system because they
Okay.
develop training on it. They're dealing with regional events And that's it. Anytime we turn on the news, we listen to reports, earthquakes, wildfires, whatever, we will see the spokesperson or the communications commander. They will always reference the incident command, operations center. All of those terms align exactly with what we started today's session on. So FEMA is very much aligned in that as well. So thank you, Ken, because I definitely agree.
Awesome.
Great.
Yeah. Does anyone have anything else for us? Also, if I mean, we have 10 minutes or so, if I can open it up, is there anything else in this kind of overall category that you're interested in learning more about, kind of in that safety and risk management that we should be looking for? We are, like I said at the beginning, we are partnering now with Cornerstone. Dave is going to do a lot of great stuff with his team for America Outdoors members. So we will be putting out those resources. And if you have any input, we'd love to hear it too. It's coming from your support. So if there's anything you all want to add, feel free again to raise your hand or type that in.
That's great. And Karen, if you don't mind, I'll just elaborate just a little more on that. You know, for people not
Please.
familiar with Cornerstone, what makes us unique is yes, we're advisors and experts, and we're really focused in around the massive umbrella of risk management. But we have doctors, we have therapists, a psychologist on the team as well, uh, risk management experts that have been in the outdoor wilderness environment and so forth. We work with organizations that deliver all types of programming, international, domestic, overnight day trips, and so forth. And I felt really passionate about creating this organization because every time I was responsible for incident response or managing crises or any of those things, I always needed a doctor, always needed that therapist as my phone a friend, as I like to say. And nobody was really speaking to this need and this gap within the industry. So that's how Cornerstone started nearly 3 years ago. Really excited about this work, and we've joined with, aligned with America Outdoors just because we would love to double down and continue developing risk management tools, get them out to AO members, and that's what we're working on the back end is what feels appropriate for members, where are their needs, and let's customize our tools so it's serving members. So there's a lot of value add to AO members through the peripheral, if you will, relationship with Cornerstone. So that's what we're working on. Would love to shout out if you're not a member of America Outdoors, there's a lot of value coming down the pipeline here through all of these arrangements. We had Earl early on as well. Just love the work that you're doing and how you're kicking off 2024.
Awesome. Thank you.
Of course.
Yeah, so that also holds true to the future. So if there isn't anything now, please feel free to reach out if there's something that does concern you that we can be working on for you or looking for you. One of the things that I hear with membership a lot is I joined America Outdoors after something happened, and now I'm learning all the things that I could have been doing or should have been doing, and I am doing now. And so we're trying to prevent you from looking after the fact. We're trying to be proactive. So there's just a lot to learn. And I think sometimes we all don't know what we don't know. So it's kind of like we're trying to put some of these resources out for you for other people's experience. But I know a lot of you have a ton of experience. So if there are useful things, please help us out with those suggestions or questions.
Great.
But if we don't have anything else coming in right now, we're getting close to our final time. We're close to the end. We'll wrap up a few minutes early. And Dave, I thank you for all the work you're doing for us and our members. It's great to have you. It's great to have your information and your knowledge and your team supporting us. We appreciate it. And to all the attendees, thank you for being here. Those of you who are members, thank you. Your membership supports the work we do and the resources that we are able to provide. So appreciate all of you. I hope you have a wonderful afternoon, and hopefully we'll see you next week for our next session. Thank you, everyone. Thanks, Dave.
Thanks, everyone. You got it.
Take
Bye.
care.